Right. So you guys ready to now see some live dance performances? Yeah. So tonight's two pieces that we're going to show were choreographed by the Heidi Latsky Dance Company, which is a phenomenal and unique dance company that was founded in 2001 that takes dancers with disabilities and disorders and fully integrates their dance abilities into these breathtaking pieces. So we're going to see two pieces tonight. The first we're going to see is entitled Grace, and it will be performed by Carmen Schoenster. So she trained with the Richmond Ballet, the Nashville Ballet, and the Charlotte Ballet, and she is in her third season with Heidi Latsky Dance. And then we'll see a second piece entitled Duet. And Duet will welcome back to the stage Greg Youdan, but he will be dancing with Justin Goldberg. And so Justin is a skydiving instructor. So he's made over 1,000 jumps out of an airplane. So he's like the most legit person I've ever met. And he also works at Microsoft, but Justin's father has Huntington's disease. And Justin went to get the genetic testing and found that he also has the mutation. So he is at high risk for developing Huntington's. And so you will see Justin and Greg in the second piece entitled Duet. So put your hands together for our dancers and welcome them to the stage.
Hello. Okay. Hey, thanks everyone. So thank you, Greg, for doing that, and thank you for inviting me. So I think folks asked me to come up and talk a little bit, like 5 or 10 minutes, and talk about what it's like being a kid growing up with a parent who has Huntington's, and then also what it's like to have to deal with that myself. And also take questions and answers. So feel free to ask me whatever you want. We have a very open relationship. All things are fair questions, and this is Greg, my boyfriend. Matt, my boyfriend. Got Greg on the head. See, this is Matt, my boyfriend. 7 years tomorrow, but 70 years. And he hasn't killed me yet, but we're getting there, especially after tonight. And then Dr. Quinn, raise your hand back there, because Matt wants to talk about me doing a study for partying and dancing. But no, he has some. And you see, there's the death face. No, but thanks everyone. So what's it like being, the son of a parent with Huntington's? And the answer is, it's hard, right? And so just to give you some background, my father is from here, the Lower East Side. He grew up in the Lower East Side in the 50s. He went to Seward Park High School. He fought his way through Seward Park High School. New York City was not like this back then. It was a fight every day to survive. You had your friends, and right, if you look at what my father had and how he defined himself, there's basically a couple of different things. He didn't like who he was as a kid. He didn't like how he grew up. He would define himself by his friends, his wife, and his son, right? And so his friends are all still friends today. We call them my uncles. They're all from the Lower East Side. They all still hang out in the Lower East Side, even though they don't live here anymore. Their picture is in Katz's if you want to go see them, because that's where they hung out and still do. And when you look at friends, right, the definition is loyalty, strength, and intelligence, right? Smartness. And so the strength to be who you are and to have character and to defend yourself and to kind of live through very tough things. Loyalty to the people you love. And then, of course, strength, knowledge, right? You got to be smart. You can't deal with dum-dums. Just can't do it. Sorry, I apologize. And we're honest too, so that's another thing. But that's come a lot to define me, and it's come to define kind of the relationship and the way I am, and that's the people in my life, and that's sort of what gets us through this toughness, right? And unfortunately, if it wasn't for my father's friends, he probably wouldn't be where he is. My mother, who obviously my father met, right, in the city, they loved each other, but my mother could not deal with it. Right, and you want to talk about the real tragedy in Huntington's, and in my family, it's not my father or me, it's my mother, who unfortunately is not here anymore. And she couldn't see her son go through what she watched her husband go through. And so even though I am not going through that, right, that is like, if you want to talk about the Greek tragedy in my life, the tragedy is my father's still here and he's pushing 80. I'm going to be here and I'm doing great. I'm can't really skydive anymore, but I'm a skydiver who teach people how to skydive, teach West Point cadets how to skydive. I went to Annapolis, went to RPI. My boyfriend went to Middlebury, so you want to talk about different experiences. I'm here. I'm doing great. I work for Microsoft. I have a really hard job. I do really well. I have really good family and all of this. And my father didn't have that, right? He didn't know what was happening. We never talked about my grandfather, right? I don't even know who he is. I couldn't tell you what his name is. And my grandmother never got it. My father's mother never, she made it to 84. She died right down the block also, Lower East Side. And never saw Huntington's. But my grandfather, who I don't know, couldn't tell you, was never in my life, clearly is who it came from. And so when my father got this, nobody knew what he had, right? We didn't know. And my father was one of those people who didn't want to go to doctors. That was just the way he was brought up. He actually never went to the doctor. We would tell him there's something wrong with you, and you can look at pictures and it's really obvious there's something wrong with him. But he wouldn't go to a doctor, and he didn't actually finally go to a doctor until he wrecked my mother's car. That was like her convertible, their car. They moved to Las Vegas to retire, and he wrecked the car, and he couldn't remember what happened. And so that's when he finally went to the doctors, and 6 months, a year later, they kind of figured out what was going on, and that became sort of, my guide. And at first I didn't want to know, right, because I didn't want to know, and we talked about it as a family, and talked, right, do I want to know? My mother didn't want me to know. And then eventually around 2010, I started having problems with work, and it sort of became obvious what the problems were. So that's when I went out to get tested, and so that's where we are. Obviously, I can't skydive anymore. That's the hardest thing for me to deal with. because that's who I am, right? And if you talk about, like, my boyfriend would tell you what I am, and when we first went out, we was on a job zone all the time, right? That's where I was. And so if you wanted to know me, that's where you'd be. And then I'd work during, and I worked these 2 jobs, and I can't do that anymore. And that for me is the hardest thing. But let's face it, if you're gonna choose between your religion or your, what's gonna pay the bills and get you into the doctor's office, you're gonna, gotta choose that, right? Gotta pay the bills. So that's where I'm at now. Things are good. Could be better, always, but they're good. I could either be, in my life, my grandmother lost 5 of her 7 grandchildren. So it could either be a tragedy or a comedy, and we want it to be a comedy. So let's keep things happy. Let's not focus on the negative stuff. So with that, any questions? No? Q&A? I'm here. Don't forget to buy. Yeah, what's up? I can't see who you are, but. So from my perspective, as someone who's a patient with Huntington's disease, so I never danced before in my life, right? I mean, again, when I was asked to do this, I'm not joking. I'm like, the only dancing I've ever done is gay circuit parties all night. Does that really count? And I was told yes, right? Why not, right? And honestly, where for me, it's how to replace the skydiving, because something that defines so much of my time, and that's literally where we are right now. And so when we talk about skydiving, actually the person who trained me to skydive was a dancer. She's whole nother story, but the daughter of an admiral, was born on an aircraft carrier, classically trained ballerina, was in Cats, right? Yeah. I mean, really, right? Matt will tell you, a really amazing person. Matt's a dancer too, and she got trained by her. We can really talk about the story. But the thing is that, she would talk about how dancers always make the very best skydivers, because they're all the same things in terms of body control and core and knowing where your legs are and body position and all of those things. And so I have that experience with her, and we always talk about the hardest people to teach how to skydive. They're the easiest to teach body, but they're the hardest when you're actually in the air, because they already know all the ranges, and it's just very difficult. So anyway, I have that experience from that, and now I did this, and this is where we are again. And so we'll see what happens, right? Anything else? I can't see, so it's speak up in the back.
Hi. I wonder, so one of the things that's really helpful for improving neuroplasticity of things is mindfulness. And so like focusing on your breathing, and then your mind is just really what your body's doing. So when you're dancing, especially that dance, which had a lot of held things, do you focus on your breathing? Do you find your attention? And I wonder if you notice anything.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, again, I go back to what I know, right? And so being a skydiving instructor, we always talk about breathing, right? There's always time to take breaths, right? And we always talk about at the end of the day, it's kind of funny, but there's I'm gonna save myself. It's really the stuff you watch on TV. That's what I did for real. Jumping out of airplanes and catching people and saving them and bringing them down and stuff. And when you have that conversation with someone and you're like, "This is your first skydive. What do we talk about? Breath, right? Breathe. You always have a time to break, to take a breathe. Your brain always needs this oxygen. That's one of the first things, right? In terms of having control. And so, again, for me, like I say, everything comes from a physical perspective, everything comes back to that. If you want to talk about how data and AI is going to save the world, I could talk about that too, but that's probably not the real thing here. And so, for me, I use those skill sets here, right? And the funny thing is, it's when I see people, as someone who taught people how to be a physical activity, and something that is very physical, but also very mental, right? It's breathing, right? It's prioritization, which is really hard. So how do you know what's the right decisions to make? And where, I always tell my students, it's when they do that first jump, I'm I'm gonna save my life. I guarantee you that. And then I'm gonna help you save your life. And then I'm gonna do something so that we learn in here at the same time, right? And so that's sort of the way I think about things. But, that doesn't help, I don't know. A little bit, maybe. I ramble too, so I'm always told to focus. Anything else? In the back, I see you.
Hi. How much would you say that engaging in dance helped you process sort of all of the complex, thoughts and emotions that come with understanding what it is that you've kind of been given in your hand of life, I guess? and like whether or not a part of the acceptance of what that was came through sort of pushing yourself to do the dancing, even though it's not necessarily like considered part of the classical sense of like what dance is, and
Right.
I don't know if that's a question.
Yeah,
That's more
no,
of a
I get it. I
ramble.
get it. Right. So I think it's a good question or a good answer. So the question is, right. And so it's funny because talking to Greg and when we're going through this, Greg, so again, my experience at dancing is Matt has an aunt who's a dancer, Ann Hebarb, and she was that very classically trained ballerina, London School of Ballet or whatever, and they have a very sort of way about an approach of how she would teach dancing, and it scared me. Like it really did. Like I don't have that view of the world, and I know people who teach skydiving like that too, and I don't have that view of the world. So being with people who are good and are going to help you progress, but are not negative, so that you feel like you're accomplishing things and you feel like you're progressing is good. Right, and then being part of a team always helps, right? You never, when you feel like people are bringing you up and not going down, right? That's always good too. And then getting on stage and actually doing it and delivering what you said you're going to do, and seeing that everything that you talked about and muscle memory, and once you get there, it doesn't matter. You'll forget about, you'll just do it. You'll forget about everyone else. All those things are good, and doing it in front of people is always good too, because you never, like, who gets to experience that normally? Mm-hmm.
Are there any doctors or nurses who treat Huntington's patients who themselves have Huntington? And what have they said or written about their strategy?
It's a good question. I don't know. Is there? Yeah.
One of the guys that writes HD Buzz has tested positive for the gene. Yeah, there's just a surprising amount of researchers in the field who are at risk or who are affected by Huntington's, and it has been a lifelong pursuit of theirs, and they go into research. So there's definitely
Yeah.
some family connections.
Yeah. I don't know about Huntington's, but at Microsoft I spend a lot of time. I have a weird background. I worked for Disney. I was engineering or whatever, but I also worked for Microsoft. I did a lot of work with life sciences and stuff. Don't ask how those go together, but they do. And Roche was actually one of my customers. But the funny thing is that you think about this is that 99% of the people who are in research and medicine are there because somebody is sick of something, right? I mean, that's the only reason to be there. It's a very hard job. Like everyone thinks that it's easy to do research in a medical field, and it's not. I always tell people, like when I work for Microsoft, it's like physics is easy. If you're building an airplane or a jet or you're going skydiving, there's these Newton's 3 laws. It's really easy, right? You can model anything. However, in the human body, you don't know how anything works. It's all a gamble, right? And it's right. And I get, well, yeah. So that's just, I think that those people are there because they're passionate about what they're doing, right? And that passion comes because somebody's had something that they want to get out, right? In the back.
Can Huntington skip a generation?
No.
No.
No, right? If you don't have it, then if you don't have the gene, then no, right? Yeah. So once you don't have the gene at all, you're good, because it's not recessive, right? See, I know.
Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else? Like we're gonna be here tomorrow too, right? No, I'm just kidding. Thanks everyone. Thanks Greg. Thanks everyone.
So my favorite thing about being the producer of this show is meeting patients. So I love hearing these stories, and they are so powerful. And they kind of, like he pointed out, a lot of people go into this field because they have a personal connection. And I see a lot of my sister in many of these people because my sister has untreatable epilepsy. And so I love hearing everybody's stories about the hard times, but how they overcame it, and then giving them a platform to talk about it and to also show their skills and just their life experiences for other people to see. So this concludes tonight's show, but I do want to say that A Lot on the Mind is going to be back for Brain Awareness Week. We've changed up a couple things. So this show is specifically for Brain Awareness Week. It's going to be held at NYU Langone Medical Center, and the tickets are free. And so you can go and respond on the Eventbrite page, which is right there. And basically, you're just RSVPing, and if you RSVP through Eventbrite, you will be entered into a raffle for some of our really cool science-themed prizes. And so we'll be hitting another movement disorder for our Brain Awareness Week event. It'll be Parkinson's movement and dance. So that's another show that I'm really looking forward to. And so I just want to end the night with thanking all of our wonderful presenters tonight. I want to thank Leora and Greg. Without them, this would not have been possible. They put in a ton of work. I want to thank our dancers who also put in a lot of work and were very, very brave showing us their pieces tonight and sharing their story. I also want to thank Caveat for hosting us, your bartender tonight, for keeping us all nice and happy. And I want to thank all of you guys. So you are the core of this show. Without you guys, there is no show. So thank you so much for coming out tonight.